experience that we've all had with this gentleman, okay? His comments, there were comments about pictures being taken. Well, fact, because that was a big word, fact is a picture is worth 1,000 words. Fact, this is a very poor business decision on the people who purchased this property. If this project actually met appropriate deadlines, and again, I don't know what the end of August means. The end of every month, there's an end. So I don't know why the end of August was a big thing, but they couldn't get something in for September. But had they made a better business decision, maybe we wouldn't go through this. We keep showing up at these meetings because this project continually shows up on board agendas. We have to keep coming. The fear is if we don't come to these meetings, something's going to happen, and it's going to be, well, nobody was at the meeting. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Town Board. Alistair Oliver Fishkill. I want to go back to this hotel up the street. For years, I've been coming to these meetings, and whenever somebody questions a lawyer or engineer, the board says, you can't question them. They're licensed. They're telling the truth just based on them being licensed. It's clear that these lawyers and engineers are gaming the system, especially in the town of Fishkill, and getting away with it. This board needs to do something about these people that are doing these tricks and prevent these issues from happening in the future. And I'd like to see that happen, because this is not the first time I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen one time with the BGB trailer park when they wanted to put up 5 homes. Old gentleman got up, said, I lived here for 30 years. You're putting those 5 homes over that little pond right there. It wasn't even on the site plan. So what's happening is these engineers are putting things on these site plans, leaving things out. This is why a couple months ago I mentioned that project over there off Cedar Hill Road. There's a monument, there's a stone that represents the Revolutionary War hospital back in 1776. I can see it happening now. That engineer saw it. The next guy comes in, it's gone, and it never existed. We need to protect our history. We need to protect our setbacks, our zoning, and all that stuff. And it seems that a particular group of people keep getting away with it. I want to see that change. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What?
So thank you.
Thank you.
So looking at this splatter graph, it's very similar to the one I showed you last time, and we raised values. So again, we will see where we fall when I come up with the roll. And I have one more. I think I showed this to you last time. This is one of my favorite graphs because it shows the assessed values starting in 2007 up through 2018, and then it overlaid the FRED index, which is the Federal Reserve Index of Housing for this area. And if you notice the way the values have changed over time, they've pretty much gone in step with the FRED index very well. So I'd just like to show that I think that we're on the right track here with values. Obviously 2007 was the high. The values have gone down significantly, but now they steadied and now they're starting to go back up, and we're following the FRED line, looks like back up at this point in time. But I had given this to you guys last time, but like I said, it's one of my favorites. I hope it shows that I'm getting it done the right way. But currently in the office, we're starting exemption renewals. That's they're due by March 1st, 2019. It's usually a pretty busy time for us. There's 184 enhanced star renewals that we have to take in. There's 207 senior citizen renewals. There's 13 disabled renewals. That's a lot of work for us. We have to mail out all those renewal forms. People have to come in with all their paperwork, all their tax returns, all their 1099s. It ends up being a pretty big job. Most of the brunt of that actually falls on Louise, because she's here every day and she's the one in the front getting it done. So I'm not going to say I'm doing it all, because in the case of these exemptions, she's really pretty good at it, and she's really good at getting them processed, keeping them in order, getting them on the computer. She's really good at that. We're also doing lots of property sketching like we've been doing for years. That's a big thing for us. We have the computerized sketching program now. It really makes sure that our sketches are right on. We use the satellite pictures to look at the properties, use the pictures that we have to make sure we have all the right data. We're going through, I created a list of every property in town based on year built, and then we're going backwards from newest to oldest. Obviously, when you start getting back to properties built in the 60s and 50s, there are no plans in the files. but a house is built in the 70s, mostly the 80s, 90s, there's definitely plans in the files for those. So we're doing it in reverse order, starting with the newest houses, which are usually already sketched, but working our way backwards. And eventually, we're going to have the whole house, the whole town sketched, electronically. So, and the state of New York is going to a new software. We were using the RPS, and that's going to drop. And then I don't know when this new software is going to come, but supposedly to be able to have a digital sketching program right in it. So as you do the digital sketching, it should then take the numbers and put them right into the system. Or now we have to do it, it's a two-step process. We sketch everything in one program, and then I put all the data into the RPS program. But I don't have a lot of faith in the state coming up with something that really is going to work, but we'll see what they come up with. They're definitely trying hard. And then we do our normal deed processing. We had 237 transfers, like I said, in that time period. But you can usually add about 1.5 times that number for non-money transfers, the setup of trusts, life estates, giving property to kids. So usually we end up getting maybe 40 to 50 deeds a month. Only about half of them are actual sales. Actually, less than half are actually sales. The other ones are more just transfers between estates, trusts, things like that. But again, those are things that we have to process just like a normal sale. So it does take up a lot of our time. So, and again, we're going to do the reval this year. It's going to be the 13th reval in a year, and a 13th reval in a row that we've done since 2007. So that's we did this. We hadn't done a reval in 20 years before 2007, and then we did the reval. Now we're keeping it up at 100% of value. So it takes a lot of work to get there, but once you get to 100% of value, I always say you should never leave it because it's difficult to get there. But once you're there, it's a lot easier to keep it than let it drop and then come back again. But I think that's the plan that they had for years is we'll do a reval and then let it drop, and then when 15, 20 years later we do a reval, we'll let it drop, then we'll do a reval. So now we're just trying to stay at 100% of value. So, which I think is working pretty well. So, and that's about all I have. Next time I'm here, if it'll be after May 1st, we'll have a lot to talk about. But like I said, right now my office is back to its normal workload, the normal season, and there's nothing crazy to talk about just now. So, if the board has any questions, I would love to.
I just want, was there an uptick in sales on the splat graph? I mean,
No, I think we're holding.
Same number?
I don't think we're too high or too low. We haven't really moved dramatically.
Okay.
We're running about 225 to 250 sales, arm's length sales.
Right, that's not including estate
Right,
transfers.
real sales, of actual transfers of property. So, but no, I'm not noticing a big difference. I mean, we've been, in the last couple of years, that's an average number. And the market's been doing pretty well. So,
Okay.
I think we dropped down, say 2010, that we were down to 170 or so transfers. But now we're back up to and I think before I got here, but 2005, 4, that's transfers are over 300. But that was just a much different real estate market. So I think one of the issues now is there's not enough houses on the market to sell. So
That's what I was asking.
so it's limiting number of transfers. So
When was it, 2005, that the state incentivized the move to 100% valuation throughout?
that's when they did incentivize those things.
Yeah.
So
And I believe back then, 28 of the 30 municipalities in Dutchess went to 100% valuation at the end of that program. I'm just curious if you know whether all the municipalities that made that move stayed there.
yes, no one's dropped out of the program to my knowledge.
Okay.
If you look at Dutchess County, I think there's only Hyde Park, Balling, and I believe there's one other town that's not at 100% of value. Everyone else is at 100% and staying there,
Okay.
at least for the foreseeable future. I don't know what their plans are for the long term. So, but as far as the assessors I talk to and that I know, the plan is to continue doing it. I think we all kind of hold the same rationale, that once you get to 100% of value, you might as well just stay there because it's difficult to let it drop for 5 years, 10 years, then have to restart the whole process again and send out letters to everyone and change everyone's value. Now I think people are kind of conditioned to the fact that we're going to reval every year, we're going to change the values every year, so it's not as much of a shock. But you don't do it for 20 years and you send out a letter to people saying, this is what your new assessment is and this is what your new taxes might be, it creates somewhat of an uproar.
Yeah.
But now that we're doing it every year and staying constant, I think it's working pretty well.
All right. And so in a place where they don't do the 100% reval, does that get equalized by the
They use
state? or-
they use the equalization
Okay.
process. So, which is, and it's kind of punitive against towns because if you don't have, they mix in all the properties into the equalization rate. So since we're heavily residential, they look at your residential properties increasing in value, and then they would decrease your equalization rate, but that would make your commercial properties also go up dramatically in value, whereas that market might not be moving at the same rate. So now you have an equalization rate that's being unfairly influenced by the residential properties, but now the commercials come in and say, hey, your equalization rate has made our property worth 30% more in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, but we haven't increased by 30% in value, because we're a commercial property, we're based on our rents and our taxes and our expenses, and we haven't gone up that much in value. So now you end up where the commercial properties end up with big cases against us. When you stay at 100% of value, that's not a possibility anymore. So,
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Good, all right,
that's it.
thank you.
All right, see you in the morning.
Thanks,
Good night.
Christian.
That moves us to our discussions, and we've all received a letter from our chief, James Shepperly, about some moves he'd like to make to appoint a couple of new sergeants and a few new detectives. And specifically, it's 2 sergeants, 3 detectives to the town department. Do we want to read the letter out loud, or are we good with? Sure. All right. This past summer demonstrated that it was appropriate for the Town of Fishkill Police Department to conduct a procedural review to determine what actions could be undertaken to provide a stronger investigatory response, especially during Detective Division off-hour periods, and to better provide support to the Patrol Division when such is warranted and needed. The uniformed force bears critical responsibility to manage the emergency aspects of scenes and basic crime scene protocols, such as securing a scene for processing, identifying and securing witnesses, etc., while the investigative responsibility to determine the facts, crimes, and offenders is primarily a responsibility of the Detective Division. However, the process to summon and deploy detectives during off-hour periods was not functioning as efficiently as desired or needed, especially when there was a need for more than one detective. The administration met with the Town of Fishkill Police Department sergeants, first-line supervisors, and the detectives as we considered ways and means to provide better procedures and structures to enhance detective case management and improve investigative efficiency. It was determined that the entire department would benefit, as well as the Detective Division itself, were the staffing level to be increased and the hours of coverage increased, as well as assigning specific detectives to be on call at times no detective was working. At the same time, it was determined that the number of patrol sergeants could also be increased, as addressed below. So 1, patrol sergeants. Lieutenant Keith Tworkin's previously sergeant assignment had not been backfilled, and with the imminent departure of Lieutenant Lindert moving to North Carolina, and my decision to seek another sergeant position versus backfilling the commissioned officer slot, brings me to request the approval of 2 sergeant candidates. Additionally, any time a sergeant is not working as the shift supervisor, the PD, the senior officer working receives a sergeant pay rate. The intended purpose being the senior officer would or will provide shift oversight, direction, and guidance. This means the impact of actually appointing sergeants is negligible in terms of cost. However, the department is best served with appropriately qualified and selected motivated officers who demonstrate leadership and mentoring, as well as supervisory oversight, and be responsible for as many shifts as possible. Second is Detective Division realignment and staffing. The operational review has resulted in development of a new division schedule that significantly increased the hours of coverage detectives will work in terms of the hours of the clock covered, but also as an overall increase in hours at times, usually 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Detectives will be doubled up. The Monday to Friday business week will now be covered from the hours of 8 a.m. to 12 midnight and use 4 shifts of 6 hours. That also provides 8 hours of overlapping coverage. 12 hours will be regularly scheduled on weekends, either 2 tours on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., or some combination that may involve Sunday. This schedule increases work hours weekly from 92 to from the current 60, an expected increase of 1,664 hours over the year during 2019. On-call coverage for all times that a detective is not working, projected to be 76 hours weekly, will be provided by the specific assignment of detectives, and when required, the assigned member will also respond to a departmental summons. It was determined staffing of the detective division should be increased by 3 positions, and the town board is requested to appoint 3 new detectives. It should be noted, however, 4 of the 8 detective positions are under New York State retirement and Social Security law earning restrictions that currently mean they cannot work more than approximately 800 hours in 2019, which closely translates to in the loss of 1 of the 8 positions. With Town of Fishkill PD's part-time structure with maximum earnings cap of 1,040 hours annually by any employee, along with with the staffing rate across the 2019 year is 3.5 detectives. This staffing level will function very effectively for the Town of Fishkill Police Department, and it must be noted that all 3 candidates submitted to appointment bring a wealth of expertise, as all are experienced detectives and investigators from other area police departments, City of Peekskill, Town of Poughkeepsie, and New York State Police. The lieutenants and I believe these assignments, promotions, along with the reorganizational initiatives that are in the process of being implemented here at the Town of Fishkill Police Department will absolutely and demonstrably enhance both patrol and detective operations, and will promote further development of the necessary team concept that is particularly important to our part-time structure as we strive to professionally meet our full-time public safety responsibilities. And with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Do we want to have anybody speak from the, want to hear from the chief? He's here.
Chief, would you like to make any statements?
Really just a generic statement that this was a process over a couple of months that really not just the administrative team looked at, but as I said, the first line supervisors, and we met with the current detectives themselves, and believe it sets the town PD up at a staffing level that will permit us better case management and also cover the
Map out what you consider to be an appropriate protocol?
Yeah, again, I'm just saying it's for a presentation.
Yeah.
And for the people in the audience, it'd probably be simpler to see because you're showing me all different types of houses in all the different areas. I
Right.
do believe that you have to do the non-homestead differently because that is definitely different.
Yeah.
But other than that,
Yeah, because it's, what we found was using something that was just uniform distorted it. And by showing, okay, if you're in this district, you're paying all these fees, it gave a clearer picture of what the actual expenses were. And we just thought it was a cleaner, okay.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Town Board. Ozzy Albert, Town of Fishkill, Glenham section of town. I enjoy seeing my property up there for an example. Gentleman here talked about the assessments. The issues with assessments is they're not done consistently. If you have a house in your development that sells for over assessed value, the assessor comes in and raises everybody's assessment in that development, not the whole town. We talked about history earlier in your presentation, and the history includes the assessed values of the Town of Fishkill. From 1997 to 2007, the Town of Fishkill claimed tax decreases every year, but they raised the assessed value, and even though the previous supervisor claimed to cut your taxes, you paid more in taxes. We're starting to see the same thing here with this presentation. The assessments need to be done fairly, where if one development has a house that goes for over assessed value, it should be done town-wide, as it was supposed to be done when the assessments went into effect in 2008. So in the Town of Fishkill, there's a house on 9D sold, a house in Dutchess Park, and Glenham sells. They add up the aggregate number, and they say it's an average of 0.15% increase for everybody. But we're not doing that. If a house sells next door to me for over assessed value, I get the same increase. So if my house went up 15 grand because the house off the street sold. I got another house sold. But when houses sell below assessed value, you don't get that decrease. So I would like to see the assessments done at a more fair rate And you also talked about history and how good the economy is doing for the town. You got to remember, there was a big 50% tax increase on a failed budget vote by this administration. That's what got this going. Imagine the county executive, the governor, or the president of the United States enacting tax increases without the legislative body. That's what happened here. As for Moody's, Moody's didn't see what was about to happen to the town of Fishkill. I don't consider them a reliable source. On the budget, you said you're going to add community policing. My understanding is not going to be community policing. It's going to be some extra detectives. Well, what are we going to have? Some guys on bicycles? What is the money going to be spent for?
The chief had asked to increase the hours of the community policing detail that he has.
Okay, thank you. Are inter-fund transfers or fund balances being used to balance the budget this year?
Yeah.
Okay. So as we've seen with the assessed values, again, you use the pie chart with the school tax. So you lower our tax rate a minuscule amount, but the problem is the county and the school tax, they don't do that. They keep it where they're at, and we end up paying, instead of paying $25 more in town tax, we're paying an additional $50 for county tax. So when all is said and done, between the school tax, our tax is going to go up about $200 per year. That's becoming unsustainable. I hope the town board goes over about these assessments. I think they should be frozen until people can get caught up, because these assessments are costing the average taxpayer, when you add everything up, at least $200 a year. I've got my bills, I looked at them, I know the history of this stuff. So, thank you very much for your time.
All right. Did you want to address it? We happen to have the assessor in the room.
Well, he does his job. He does what the board transcribes him to do. That's up to you guys to change it, not him. That's what I've been told. Is that wrong?
What's really illegal for the board to tell me what to do?
Well, is it wrong? Do you do the assessments town-wide?
There's an open mic here.
Yeah, do you do the assessments town-wide, or do you do it by development?
I do every property.
Christian, could you
Yeah.
take a seat, just so we have a mic on you?
I do it town-wide. I break it down by neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
obviously, when I do it. Some neighborhoods are moving more than others.
Well,
So when I look at neighborhoods and I say, okay, these neighborhoods are up a certain percentage, these are up a lot more or less, so I try to do a fair
that's
evaluation.
I agree with that. I
Right.
understand exactly what you're doing. But you're not dividing out through the whole town. No, you're not doing that.
I'm not what, I'm sorry?
You're not spreading out through the whole town with the assessed values.
I'm not giving everybody the same increase or decrease,
Well,
no.
exactly. And
But I am doing everybody in town.
And before you were hired, when they sold the 100% assessments, when it came into effect in 2008.
Well,
that's
I was
how it
here in
supposed to be
2008.
done.
I was here in
That's
2007.
how it was supposed to be done. MJ Watch was here before you, right?
Well, yes, but the first year their reval came out was 2007. I was hired to be the assessor for that reval, so
Exactly.
I was here when the numbers came out.
Okay,
So
okay,
I've been the assessor for every 100% assessment
yes,
since 1987,
okay.
because that's when the last time they were at 100%. So I try to do the best I can do.
Oh, I know you do. I
So,
got,
okay,
I come in every year and
Oh, yeah.
try to get it down a little bit, and I appreciate your concern, and I
Right.
appreciate what you do. I just think it should be better, and I think the town board should review the process. Because like I said, every year, yeah, the town tax only went up $25, the school tax, and they use the same rules to get those taxes up, and it comes up to $200 a year when you add it up.
Do you want
5
to
years,
talk,
it's $1,000.
so that's
do
always
you want to
been
talk about who has oversight over your work?
well, I'm the one who has, I mean.
But I mean from the state.
Yeah, really, the town board doesn't tell me what to do. The town board tells me to go out and be the assessor. They don't tell me, raise these assessments, lower these assessments.
course not.
That never works like that. But we do have the State Office of Real Property Tax Services. They oversee what I do. So after I complete a reval, they take the roll, they measure it, and they decide where my level is. And if I'm
Understand.
not within 100%, they don't give us 100%.
Yeah, I
So-
understand that.
So I do have oversight over me, reviewing the rolls and telling me that I am within the
So
range.
I never said you had no oversight.
So-
Never said that.
Okay, no, I'm
Never
saying,
suggested
so,
that.
okay.
I'm trying to
So-
get the town board to redo these assessed values and how we do them every year. I think it's just costing us more money, because when I look at my tax bill, I see it go from 2.1 to 2.0. I'm thinking I'm getting a tax cut. When I get the tax bill, my taxes went up. It's not making sense, and as you know, the assessed values were supposed to be a revenue-generating issue. It was supposed to be dropped down for whatever the assessed value was when it went up. So if your house went from $300,000 to $500,000, that tax rate should go down to correspond that amount, and you shouldn't be paying more. That's not happening. That's my gripe about these assessments.
Right, well, there is each municipality, county, school, they need more money to operate each
We
year.
know
They
that.
raise the budgets a little bit each
We know
year
that. And we saw
with the cap.
And we saw the big pie where the school tax had most of the money.
Right.
It just keeps generating the money because now the assessed values are up.
Right.
So if it was just a school tax, I mean, the town tax, it's one thing, but when you add on the county tax, when you add on the school tax, which uses the same methodology, that's where we start getting pinched.
Right, well, that's where the town, it becomes frustrating, because they have no control over the county
Exactly.
or the school. And
Well,
they're
we do.
they're taking the lion's share of the
We do,
taxes.
we can freeze the assessed values for a little period and get everybody together, and I understand the equalization rates and all that other stuff. But I'd like the town board to revisit it. That's
Okay.
And I think you're doing a good job, I got nothing against you, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you next year, so.
Okay.
That's the way it is. So thank you very much, town board, thank you, Mr. Assessor.
No problem.
Louise Daniele, Dutchess Park. Ozzy just hit it on the head, actually, because my taxes did go up $200, but I have a question about the budget. I would like to know, what is the school tax collection fee of $110,000 used for?
To cover expenses.
Expenses for?
We would not have a tax operation in the fall except for Wappinger. So we have 3 school districts in the town, Haldane.
Give it over.
Okay.
Thanks.
With that, and Madam Clerk, you've had the chapter in your office for quite some time. We also have it up online. All right, so is anybody here who wants to be heard on Chapter 150?
Just nothing about the law, I just have a question on the comprehensive plan. You said it was adopted? There was a terminology the board used a few times about codification. Is there a difference?
Yeah, so the comprehensive plan, I was on the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee, finished its work, I believe, in 2003.
Yeah, I saw your name on it.
And then the town didn't do anything with it.
Okay,
Finally, in 2009, it was adopted.
that's adopted, okay.
But your Chapter 150 doesn't change. You can speak to it, but, there was no change in the actual law yet.
Okay.
To do that, you have to rake through and make sure that everything's coordinated and that you're not creating conflicts, duplicity. So we're at the end of that process now, to go through that comprehensive plan update and try to incorporate it into the law. And a lot of what a lot of the work that was done so far was really just cleaning up old stuff in there that was conflicting or confusing.
So basically, what you're trying to do is update the code, and then you're going to codify the comprehensive plan?
Well, once we adopt this code, it becomes a law. So that'll be what goes to the planning board, and that's what the planning board's got to follow.
Okay, because I just remember you saying codified and.
Right.
Got it.
Right,
Thank you very much.
to make it the law.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else that wants to be heard?
Good evening. My name's Marty Beister. I live up on Osborne Hill on Highview Road, and I'm here to petition my government, in accordance with the First Amendment in the Constitution, for redress of my grievance. My grievance is that in regard to item 4 on the agenda is the discussion of planning board appointments. I was very disappointed to be at the last planning board meeting, where after the Continental Commons made their presentation before the board and opened the floor for comments, there were none, absolutely none. What a disappointment. It only seems to confirm for me that the board, that what's happening in front of the planning board in regard to Continental Commons is that Continental Commons the board does not have all the information it needs to make a decision. And I'm also concerned that my comments before the board will be restricted after the board makes a decision to the 3 minutes to try to dissuade them from what they make. And I'm here to ask now that on September 19th, I think it was, I have submitted a letter to the board asking if you would confirm for me that the board has the planning board has, and also that the state historic preservation office has, the most recent RSI, the Radar Solutions International report that was prepared and submitted to Hartgen on 2012. And in that report, there are at least, according to Radar Solutions International, at least 5 and perhaps more man-made structures. That, to me, when I look at the final report of the Paleo West report in front of the planning board, it doesn't even refer to that particular report, the RSI report, nor does it
change in the levy in the Roundabout Water and Sewer District, because when the tentative budget was prepared, we did not have updated benefit units for those 2 districts.
Right.
So I'd use the prior year benefit units. There's been a slight change, and that correction that you see is just the shift between the in-district and out-of-district users for the debt service.
Thank you for that. Welcome. With that, we'll open up the hearing to comments.
Daniel Oberhauser, 29 Willow Road. This well-spoken gentleman that mentioned the changes being made on the zoning, he mentioned the Convenient Mart gas stations. The Sunoco station across the street. I've had a couple times since they've been the Dunkin' Donuts in there where people zip out without even looking. And I've seen it at least 100 times with other vehicles. And it's a hazard. I had a neighbor that had his leg broken going in and out of the Valero gas station. So this has to be taken in consideration when you make any changes or new rules or regulations.
Thank you.
I'd just like to clarify that it was used as an example of something that might have occurred over time, but your comment is well taken.
Is there anybody else that would like to be heard on this? Ms. Preister?
Good evening. My name is Martin Beister. I live on Highview Road. I'm in the town of Fishkill, 58 Highview Road. And I'm here to discuss 3 subjects, cultural resources, historic districts, and also transparency. I went through the summary of comments that are on the internet, on your website, that I just think was made by the consultant, and I noticed in there the words, the acronym SEEKR. And the other thing I noticed in the, I think it was on 150. Oh, yeah, 150-74A, 150-97A, it discusses SECRA, and I guess I didn't get the page number, but I'm also concerned about a comment about the planning board review. The cultural resources issue to me is not defined. It seems to me that, at least from my point of view, it's not defined either in the planning, the comprehensive plan for the town, and it's also not doesn't seem to be discussed as particularly in any revisions. Now that may not be necessary, but what I don't see is how you can make zoning decisions without knowing what the cultural resources are in the town. I bring this up because of the maybe 10 or 12, 30 years I've lived here, and the 10 or 12 that I've been actively interested in the history of this town and the immediate area. I've seen a lot of resources just plowed under, quite frankly, or in complete disregard for the resources work done on a piece of property. I can give you the specific examples if you want, but basically it disturbs me that, and quite in some cases, I'm not sure if the planning, the inspector, the building inspector is responsible for correcting these errors, or I don't know if they're zoning errors or planning board errors, but when you're in a historic district such as the Fishkill Supply Depot, and you're digging a trench like the town did to connect the water, I think it was this water supply out of the wells, there was no investigation of the trench that was done, And to me, that's an example of just complete oversight, perhaps accidental. I don't think it was done deliberately, but there was no inspection of the trench that was dug, which today, according to the last presentation in front of the planning board, would have been where the stables are. And that really has never been investigated thoroughly, in my opinion, but that's another issue. So, so to me, cultural resources are not in the plan. I think before you can come up with a reasonable zoning plan, you need to know what your cultural resources are. There should be an inventory and a summary of the cultural resources that exist. Over the years, for example, the Jackson House, it's in the town, but in the village also, it just disappeared. I don't know if anybody realized what happened in the Jackson House or not. There are other examples of these things just being, I think the cultural resources are dying a slow death, many cuts, as I guess the Chinese proverb would say. So I'm saying that I question the legitimacy of any changes to the zoning without consideration of the cultural resources, and in that respect, also historic districts. I mean, where does that fit into all this? The village itself has a historic district, but as far as I know, as understand the zoning law, there's none in the town. And what bothers me most here is who determines what a cultural resource is? I mean, right now, and a good example for me to talk about, because I've been involved with the Fishkill Supply Depot, is the Continental Commons development. The Continental Commons development, in 1974, a woman by the name of Julia Cartwright, a academic from Pennsylvania, I think Temple University, discovered what she called remains of a foundation or several more than one foundation, one or more foundations that were uncovered about a foot or so below the surface. And to this day, the best I've seen, and to me it is actually misleading, was for a archaeologist to make a presentation in front of the planning board right here in this room and just wave it off as some kind of structure that was not square in the corner. And he said it just ended. I mean, is that archaeology or is that just guesswork? It's not satisfactory. And the bothers me even more is that is it a cultural resource or is it some mystery foundation that appeared here from Mars when they landed here many eons ago? It just doesn't make sense that it could have gone on since 1974 and not be resolved as is it a cultural resource or not, and has it been adequately investigated? And the effort by Paleo West to resolve that question is, it just muddied the waters. It didn't resolve the issue. And the most interesting thing to me right now about what is a cultural resource is what was recently discovered and not discussed in front of the planning board, is 5 man-made structures. They were looking for the bones that they say I buried in 8 50 by 50 square foot excavations on the site, and in there, in the process, they found what is reported as 5 of those structures, maybe more, but at least 1 in each of 5 of those 50 square foot areas to be man-made structures. And that was not presented in the last presentation before the board. It raises the question of what is cultural resources? Who decides it? You? The planning board, the public? And if the public is the only way to do it right now, we can't have the planning board making the final decision saying, all right, well, you come to the preliminary hearing and you can ask all questions like we already done. And then before the seeker process is finalized, not give us another chance, because I would raise that question in front of the planning board. I'm here because I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to raise the question, what are you going to do about the 5 potential structures? What are you going to do about the Cartwright structures? And then the more general question is how come the Mexican restaurant, how come the town of Fishkill itself could have dug trenches in what is known as a National Register site, the Fishkill Supply Depot, without a proper investigation? One Sunday morning, I happened to be down there, and they were excavating for a sanitary system. I called Mr. Petrus, I think it was his name at that time, and he went down and took care of it. But what surprised me, it was a Sunday morning kind of like we used to call it in the Navy, midnight requisition. Just go in there when nobody's looking and you take it. No. Thank you very much. I want you to consider the definition of who and the definition of cultural resources and an inventory for the town. I want to know if you're going to incorporate historic districts and what they mean. And secondly, I want 2 reviews by the public of anything that concerns archaeology. And I'm particularly interested in a second review for what's been presented for the planning board by Continental Commons. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to be heard on this?
Thank you, Town Board. Ozzie Albert Glenham. Can you elaborate a little more on the cluster housing?
I can describe what cluster housing is, yes. When someone proposes to build residential units on a property, the zoning establishes how many units can be built on that property. Once that is determined, let's say that it's 12 units, whatever it might be, those units can be clustered on a portion of the property, a portion of it, so that if there's an important open space or want to have part of it set aside for recreation or whatever, they could build those 12 houses clustered in one portion of the site. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. It doesn't change the number of houses that can be built.
Okay, and in the beginning of your statement, you said what was permittable. Is that when you look at a map, or you go to the site to make that determination? For example,
Well, normally,
there's 12 acres of land, 1 house per acre, you got 12 homes. You look at a map, there's nothing there, it looks good. Let's move all those 12 homes in 4 acres. But if you go to the site, there's a stream, there's a hill, there's wetlands.
those
Do
things
you
are
account
all-
for that first?
Under
and
the
then subtract
statute,
it?
Those things are
has to be
counted.
approvable, so
Yeah.
the planning
Has to be
board would need
approvable.
to look at whether or not
Right.
it could approve the 12 one-acre lots before it would allow them to be clustered.
So if you, in those 12 acres, if you can only build 8 homes, that would be the
That's
max
all
you
they
could build
can
on that
do.
site.
Yeah.
Board determines the number based on the
Well-
characteristics of the site.
The board,
Well,
or the
Yeah.
board can give a variance and, you know.
I'm not talking about anything specifically.
Okay.
As counsel says, that when someone proposes to lay out a property, they have to go onto the property, they have to know where the wetlands are, where the streams are, where there are areas that can't be built, and the board has to make a determination that they believe what an applicant proposes is buildable, is usable. So it may not be that you can put 12 houses
Okay.
on 12 acres.
I'd just like to follow up on Mr. Beister about this historical site. As you know, there's a marker from a Revolutionary War cemetery back at Deer Knoll Crossing. I think that's a good thing to put in this plan, that you can't build on anything that's historical. And if you find it, you got to preserve it, and you can't remove it. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to be heard on this matter?
And, but the first priority, in my humble opinion, if I was in any one of these places, I would focus on the health issue, not just for Tyrone or everybody here, but for the families, the children. All right? I'm old school. You put it under the rug, it festers. That's going to fester. All right? Because I had health issues at my home because sewage used to come in my home. And I spent a lot of money getting that together. Okay? But I'm representing somebody here that just won't say nothing or in the town. I respect all of you because you've got your own families and you've got a responsibility in representing us. Okay? So God bless you. And the health issue is first priority, in my humble opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyrone just brought up an issue about the health issue, so I just wanted to reiterate also, if I have neighbors that feel like I feel, they shouldn't have to come to you and tell you their health issues because it's private.